Hey, hello, hello, hello. Is anybody there?
Good night. I'm here, Mr. Wilkinson. Day now.
Okay, Janelle, let me start off with you. Hey, Janelle. Wonderful. India. Not yet. Gretchen.
Here.
Okay. Gretchen. Rose. On the way. Okay, let's see. Ebonique.
Here.
Okay, Ebonique, wonderful. And Karen. Karen. Okay, there somewhere. All right, first things first, let's talk about that examination. Anybody has any comments on that? Exam results.
Well, sure. Me nothing to say.
My sentiments exactly.
Well, you
Mr.
know,
Wilkinson, you know I have a lot to say.
okay, Ebony has a lot to say. It's my
No.
No, that's stay now.
Oh, name. Yeah, Dana has a lot to say. Dana, let it rip.
Mr. Wilkinson, I have to say that I am highly disappointed in the grade that I got. I'm trying to figure out where did I go wrong, because I did not walk out that exam thinking that that was the grade that I was going to get, and I didn't even feel like it feel like I failed the exam, and I at that point in time I thought, okay, I got the majority of the questions right. So I'm just trying to figure out where did I go wrong.
Okay. Now, I certainly can't argue with that, Dana. I know exactly what you mean. And what grade you thought you would have gotten? Just a ballpark figure based on
I felt like for the most part, I know there were two questions particularly I did not answer.
right.
And those were the two I felt like I didn't remember going over those things in class.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was, I didn't remember the terminology in terms of being able to answer it. So I didn't want to fluff. So I just decided to just not do it. And that question was worth like 1 point, which was one of the meetings. And that was one of the first set of questions. And then the second one maybe was worth about 5 points. So I'm just trying to figure out which ones did I mess up on.
So based on your calculations, you are looking at something in the 80-something%.
Right, something like that, yes.
Oh, darn it. I understand completely. It happens. Now, let me tell you, sometimes examinations can get a little tricky in terms of how we perceive what's going on. And I know what you mean because I've done many exams in my lifetime. And some of them that I felt really great about, they didn't go the way I planned for them to go. And then some that I felt like lousy about, like, man, that sucks. They went completely the other way. So that happens. Now, to try to answer where you went wrong, well, let me just put it this way. Um, without disclosing any trade secrets, you know, the whole thing in your case, as in most of the other person's cases, give or take. For most people, it was a half and half situation for some reason. Okay, and it's hard to get into how it happened that way, but it just happened to work out half and half, where folks got a good half of the paper they did very well on, and then the other half, so to speak, there was some bumps and grinds, and there was So in there were little combinations. I call it half and half for simplicity. And that happens. The exam was not a difficult exam, but it was not necessarily an easy one either. You really had to have been firing on all cylinders and all that kind of stuff to really hit the target. When I say the target, I mean like the 80 something and above target. It was really not most of my audit students, one or two every now and then might get up in there, but usually the average grade for most of my audit students is somewhere between 50 and 70 something, depending on what's going on. And it's not a reflection on the student. It's just that, especially for first exam, it's just that the some parts of the exam are fairly straightforward, and then other parts like, oh, did I really? I think I did. Um, and then they discover that it wasn't quite that way. For example, Dana, most persons got the short answer questions correct. One or two people went completely away, lost 1 or 2 points, but that was really not the problem. The problems came up with questions like number 3, and that talked about folks did well with window dressing, but when they got to the other 3 issues that impact financial statements like non-provision and overvaluations and stuff like that, understandably, that may not necessarily be something folks would focus on. But people got window dressing and top management, stuff like that, right? People got primary and secondary stuff, right? For the most part, most persons got the correct detection of errors and frauds, that part of it. Now, when it got down to question 4, folks did some weird stuff. Some persons got 1 or 2, like, what kind of things you can do to check to see if everything is okay, check the trial balance, check the balance sheet, check the opening balance, things like that. Some people, okay, some of that, not some of it, and so on. Collusion and top management, so that was half and half. Some people put top management, others they didn't remember collusion for some reason. Some people put collusion. So again, it was almost like when folks are answering questions, depending on the question, they would get most of it correct, half of it correct, and it would swing back and forth, which explains why the average grades ended up being like half and half, so to speak. The limitations, the 3 limitations got some people stuck for some reason. Not everybody. Quick question 7 definitely got some people stuck in terms of how do we determine true and fair, like a good balance sheet, good P&L statement. Persons didn't get things like disclosures, legal, gap, and that kind of stuff. I understand that. Okay, this is first time, blah, blah, blah. Some people did okay on principle and clerical, others didn't remember, and they're like, whatever, the hell with it, and they put something else or didn't answer it. Some people got commission and omission, and then for question 8B, and then when it came to coming up with the different types of fraudulent activity like manipulation of cash and accounts, some people were okay, some people were not. Again, it was a interesting swing back and forth depending on the student. Number 10. What characteristics the auditor should have: integrity, confidentiality. A lot of people didn't audit evidence, didn't seem to have that in their repertoire, so they lost points. How the auditor should get information. Some people were okay, annual reports, minutes. Some people didn't remember, or they put something else that they thought it was. Some people got all 3 of them correct. So again, it was an interesting cross section of responses. Number 13, what is an audit program? I think a lot of people got that answer correctly. Advantages and disadvantages. Again, some did, some didn't, for whatever reason. And what else? Number 14, folks were not very keen on 14 in terms of the audit papers. What is the purpose of those things? To control the work and to have evidence. Because
Good day. Sorry to excuse me, Mr. Wilkinson. Did you send the papers back? I'm trying to figure out if everybody else is reading off of something or it's just,
no, I'm just throwing out stuff.
oh, okay then, okay.
Yeah. Just for just to give you some insight. Question 15, permanent and current files. A lot of people didn't remember that for some reason, and what kind of documents you go in. So a lot of what happened is the ones that folks were really strong on, they were okay, and the ones that they were not, they were just not. So it either was or wasn't, and it ended up with the average grade being somewhere in the 50 somethings on average when you put everything together. And that does not put you in an unusual category. This is not uncommon for audit students doing their first exam. Really, it isn't. Okay. Number 16. Well, most people didn't do number 16 at all, and you'll see when I'll say something about that a little bit later. That was 6 or 7 points for the most part. The persons didn't really attempt. And number 18, interestingly enough, different types of sampling, random estimates, and haphazard. Right? A lot of people didn't get that. So again, those questions that were answered well, and those that were not were like, and then there are a couple others folks that, you know what, I don't even have a clue, I don't think, so they just kind of left it blank, understandably, even though I don't agree with leaving questions blank. Let me just say, for the most part, by the way, somebody got 68 in this test, which is considered a fairly high score, okay, for this kind of paper. I will admit it was not,
Yay! It wasn't me.
but one of your,
Mr. Wilkinson, I'm confused by you saying that 68% is the highest score.
okay, let me,
Very confused by that because to my calculation, in order for us to be able to pass the midterm, in order for us to pass this course, each exam, we need to at least get 75% on each exam and about 7.5% on the coursework and 7.5% on attendance. So I'm very confused when you're saying that 68% is good.
I understand your confusion. But again, you cannot determine the final outcome of your semester until everything is added up. For example, if you got 55% in the midterm and you get 90% in the final, that changes your perspective immediately, doesn't it?
It does, however, it's almost
Okay.
it's almost like you're saying that every exam is going to follow this format, and if the highest score, you said within yourself that in all of your classes, most persons get either between a 60, or I think you said a 50 something and a 70. So I'm just confused as to how would somebody pass the entire course if basically from the jump, if you don't get 75% or 75% in both exams, at least is the minimum.
Well, we don't.
You basically can, basically at this point, if you got a 50%, you would need to get 10%, 10%, and 40% in order to, and everything else in order to pass the class. So I'm very confused.
Well,
That's making it so either you give up now or you understand throwing the towel because it's rough.
folks, let me tell you youngsters something about throwing in the towel. If you start getting into that stuff now, that will not be good for you later. You do not let the results of one examination determine the outcome of your semester.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mr. Wilkinson, but it was still.
Of course we are. Because
it just had to take 1 or 5 little drinks after that.
I understand it. Remember, all of us have different agendas, different study time, different energy, different time we put into it. I get it. That all working students are that way. Some of them, for whatever reason, people do different things to achieve different results. You cannot say who's doing what and to what extent. But what I will say is the key to this stuff is, first of all, you do not, because you didn't get 80% in your first test, you decide that your semester is over. That is total madness. Okay? The same way you may have gotten 55 or 60% in the midterm, you might get 80 or 90% in your final. That's up to you. That's my point. You just can't throw it in and say, well, I didn't get it the first time, then the hell with it. All is lost. All is not lost. You have to keep going until the end. Furthermore, you don't know whether at the end of the day, your lecturer will mark straight up or on the curve. So if you throw in your bloody towel now, you will not have the luxury of knowing if you don't finish. True or false?
Just to make that
True,
test
Mr.
like that, come
Wilkinson.
on. That's plenty information. I don't even know. I might just take this book and just be studying 24/7 to retain all this information because you don't know what come in.
Have you ever been in an exam where you knew it was coming? I
You know,
said,
there's a cram down, a hold everything in your head.
of course I do. Of course I do. I know exactly what it's like.
That's why you're so smart right now.
And maybe a little crazy about it, but that's what you have to do.
Ah,
Let me tell you a little secret about what I did when I was a working student, in some cases with a family, like you guys, some of you. I would work just like you all day until 6 o'clock. Listen to me very carefully. This is a long time ago. And when I tell students this, they're like, really? You must have been out of your mind. I'm not flicking doing that. Well, you get the results for the time you put in. Here's what I mean. When I was in university, for example, first of all, like many of you, I didn't have an employer or family or father and mom to pay my fees. So first of all, I had to find the money, borrow the money, whatever it is to pay. So for me, that was the first flicking incentive. How about that? And here's what I mean. That was not the only one. That was the first one. What I mean by that is I made up in my mind that I cannot afford not to be successful in any course. Okay? Does that mean that I was fabulous and 100%? Certainly not. But when you fall down on one side, you redouble your efforts and you come back and pick it up. That's the nature of this whole life you're in. Talking about a bloody examination. And here's what I did. I would come from work somewhere around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and I would take a power nap for about 3 or 4 hours. And then I would get up around 2 o'clock in the morning and I would study straight through until 6 o'clock when it's time to go to work every day. And on weekends, while people were partying and having fun, I would be home in my pajamas doing whatever I need to do all flicking Saturday, unless something critical I had to deal with, and I come right back. And all Sunday until my semester was over, because I made up my mind that ain't no way in hell. And I knew
but I wish I could adopt that, but I might follow.
well, I
Well,
know.
I know. For me, I was tired, and then I had a lot going on. So
I know. I know exactly what you mean, Gretchen.
I had a lot going on
Yeah,
around me. Couldn't even focus.
that's what makes this whole thing challenging. But the good thing about it is that you hang in there, that you go through the process. See, getting your best grade every single exam is not going to happen. It's not always possible, but it's never always the end of the day. You just have to keep going. So with all the things that you guys may have on your agenda, you just have to find a way to redouble your efforts for your final examination and go for it.
I agree.
Strange things happen. Okay? Remember, the race is not won at the beginning. You have to finish it. That's the key. Because remember, suppose you got 85% in your midterm, then you have a bad final, 37. Then what? Same problem. So
But
what you
it's scary, you know, I trying to figure out how you can pass it now, because I don't see with a 50% grade, how you can make that 70% mark. Well, to get the 10 points, you get a point of classing.
let me say this. If you get 80,
I can need my whole 10 points.
of course, that's the whole idea. That's why you have it. So you could work to the 10 points. See my point? And that's why you have the other scores so that the whole class is not based on some academic thing. It's also based on your other work and your other performance, like coming into class and being involved in doing your research paper. It's not just about passing the exams. Now, if you got 80% in your final, 80% plus 50%, how much is that?
130.
130 divided by 2.
130, 65.
Okay. So you're getting yourself close to that 70, aren't you? Right?
So let me see it though.
Right?
Right.
But it's up to you to get the 80 now. If you got 50 the first time, you have to try and get the 80 next. That's how it works. And that's what you have to do. That's what students are called upon to do until the whole deal is done. You do
Please don't mark, like, please don't mark the paper and question and answer paper hard.
what question answer paper is that?
You gave us 1,000 questions to be bringing up our brain.
Oh, you mean the research paper?
That's all.
No, I don't expect you guys. I'm not going to be marking it like some university. No,
Okay.
once you have attempted to complete the paper and you complete it in all respects, for the most part, most persons will get no doubt full marks. You'd have to write something completely stupid and out of the way. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
That's the whole point. So I'm saying to you, this thing is quite doable. All right. And I am also giving consideration to whether or not I will allow you guys to do a makeup exam. I haven't decided on that yet, but I don't want that to be the live all, want all. That would just
I
be,
think we can need that because I
well,
can need this thing on my resume.
I'll decide if we're going to do the makeup exam, but I don't want that to be the issue that causes you to back off and slow down with putting the best foot forward in preparing for your final and doing a good research paper. See my point?
So I confirm that the
My
final
concern,
exam is which date, sorry?
all right,
The final exams again, confirm the date
go ahead.
for me.
The 28th of July,
Okay,
20th?
when is,
28th.
which date?
28th, okay, okay.
Which day is that?
Wait, that's a Thursday. That's the last
That's
Thursday in the month.
Thursday, the 28th of July, week after next.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Finish
this
my
week,
paper.
this weekend, yeah, next weekend, you should be finishing up your paper somewhere along the way so that you can
Yeah.
have the maximum amount of time to review for your final exam. From what I can see, the final exam may not be as quote unquote intense as the midterm examination. So I
Jesus Christ.
to commit to studying. See, let me tell you something about the examination process in case you haven't picked up on it yet. Typically, my questions will ask you my exam will ask you questions about the key points. I am not necessarily going to take you into all of the unnecessary detail because we've already read it and discussed it in class. All you need to do is to understand what the key topics are, what the examples are, and what they mean. If you go over them over and over again, then you should be fine. The details of each topical issue, we would have already discussed it. I'm not going to go in the details and say, hey, let's go down to the second paragraph on the 15th line and ask you. I'm not going to do that. Okay, the questions are going to be straightforward. They're going to be the key point. What are the objectives? What are the reasons? What are the guidelines? They're going to be very clear, straight from the text that we're discussing. All you have to do, though, is commit it to memory and understanding. And if you do that, you'll be fine. I think some persons took some shortcuts in preparing for the first exam.
I know, I think I was overthinking and trying to pile up too much information in my head. But like now, like how I go through the notes, I'm trying to simplify it
Yeah, and remember,
as much as possible where I could remember it in my terms.
that's exactly what I was saying initially. Once we've gone through the lectures and discussed it and you've read it and all that stuff, then all you really need to do is focus on the key points, the definitions, the examples. Remember a few examples. What are the objectives? What are the goals? What are the, say things like that. And then you put them in whatever language is good for you. You don't have to remember it word for word. I don't expect it even. And then keep studying it over and over. You cannot, there's no substitute for the study process. It stinks. Studying is terrible, boring, and it's hard work. But that's what you have to do. And the harder you do it and the longer you do it, the better your results will be. If you don't do it too hard and don't do it too long, your results will reflect it. That's just one of those crazy things. Okay? Typically, the student who studies hardest and longest get better results. Those who don't get something else. No magic formula. Imagine my surprise a million years ago when I found that out. Oh my God. You mean I really have to sit down with this for hours and hours every day? The answer is yes. But I'm tired, I know. Go to sleep and then get up. But I don't want to get up. Well, if you don't want to get up, that's a whole other problem. See my point? I have things to do on Saturday. Well, that's a whole other problem. You have to decide about these things as a student. That's what makes students unique until your semester is over, and then. Okay. So if you guys do that, you should have a better final. I know exactly, but you have to make that commitment. Okay. I'm thinking about whether to give you a makeup exam so that you can accumulate some extra points on your midterm. That will help you at the end of the day. But really, the key thing is to do your best preparation for your final and your paper. Okay, of course, because all of those things will come together to determine your final grade. Okay? Whether I mark on the curve or not will depend on the overall results at the end of the day. I will not make that decision initially. I will look at it at the end of the day and decide, okay, based on my discretion, is this going to be a straight up or is this going to be a grade on the curve? That's what lecturers typically do. But we don't make that decision up front because we want to give the students the opportunity to do their very best first. You start talking curve, then people start taking days off. Well, I don't have to really study that hard. If he's marking on the curve, then I can just like take some breaks. And I don't want you to do that. Okay, so just go for it. Say the devil with it. Put in as many hours as you can that your time and your energy will permit, and that is the result that you will get at the end of the day. Okay. Once I decide on the makeup exam, I shall let you guys know. If the answer is yes, I shall send the examination to each of you with instructions to go ahead and complete the paper, get it back to me within a specified time, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But that's not the most important thing in your life. The most important thing in your life right now is getting through the next 2 class sessions, finishing your research paper, and studying the hell out of what you have to do for your final exam. Sorry, I don't envy you guys. But that's what a student's life is all about. And don't ever let that discourage you from doing whatever you have to do academically. The results will come down the road. Okay? Let me tell you another secret. I have done many qualifications out of the UK. Anybody did any UK courses? Compliance, accounting, anything? No?
No, sir.
No. Let me tell you guys a secret. Typically, in the United Kingdom, the average passing grade is 50%. Now, you might say, only 50? Let me tell you something about those bloody Brits. You will have to work your you know what off to pass the examination. You don't cruise past 50. That's how they are. I've always been that way. Okay? It's a crazy thing. And many students have got caught with that. It's to 50. Any fool can get 50. Then they discovered it's not that easy. Not for the Brits. Okay? They have a very strict code. So if they tell you the passing grade is 50, that means you have to get on your bike and pedal like hell. For sure. Okay? So I'm just saying that to you to let you know that depending on who you are and what you're doing, you're in good company, especially if you're making your best effort. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters most. Okay? So don't worry about it. Just make preparations for your final, do your studies, put in your time, make your notes, go over and over and over and over and over and over until you're sick and tired. While people are partying, having fun, you stay home and tell them, leave me alone, over and over and over. It stinks, but that's what you have to do. And that's what you should do with any courses that you do going forward. The benefits will come to you later, guaranteed. Okay? Even though sometimes it's painful, for sure. All right. So having said that, should I decide to do the makeup, I will send you the examination sometime between now and tomorrow, I suspect. And if that is the case, I will give you instructions as to when they need the paper back, which will be in a very short period of time. Part of the makeup exam is not to give you all the time in the world, but get you to commit to doing it so that you can get whatever additional credit.
Yeah, so I guess we'll have to wait, have sleepless nights to make that up.
That's the whole idea. No pain, no gain. It's like having a baby. Man, if you don't go through that crap, no baby. And it's like that with academics. You have to go through some freaking this and that. But at the end of the day, here comes the baby, the results, the information, the stuff to help you later on with your work and your profession. And that's the whole idea with this thing. Okay? And that's why I encourage students, give it your best shot. A lot of students sometimes they just try to come in to get through. And I get that. But always try to give it your best shot because there are other benefits in addition to passing your course when you give it your best shot. Okay? So how do I know that? Because I've been around a very long time. All right. Any other questions then before we begin? So now you have an idea of where we're going, what you have to do, and I assure you, if you do it diligently, everybody in this class should be able to survive. Okay, but you have to do it diligently. And that's really what the deal is. Okay? No pain. I know it stinks. Any other questions? Okay. I have a question for the class before we get into boring auditing. When I say boring, I don't mean it's not important. I'm just saying that a lot of people think it is, and part of the reason for that is they don't understand the serious importance of the audit process, whether you're an auditor or an employee. That's the fascinating thing. A lot of times, for example, if you tell somebody at your job that you're doing an auditing class, they say, you want to be an auditor? Not necessarily, because the information you get by studying it is information that every employee in every organization should know. And the more you know about it, the better of an employee you can be. Period. That's the whole point. Okay. And if you happen to be an internal auditor, then even better. You have some more tools to help you do your job better. And that's why you do this stuff. Okay, for sure. All right. Has anybody ever heard about the term inclusive? Anyone?
Inclusive?
Inclusive.
I've heard of it, and that means, I mean, of course, you have the all-inclusive hotels. That's everything included.
Okay, I like that because in the old days, Ebony, I'm glad you have no idea how happy I am you said that. Uh, that's you'll find out that that's not what I'm thinking, but you'll find out also why I'm happy you said that. In the old days, not too long ago, that's what we would think about when we think about inclusive. Obviously, nowadays, inclusive doesn't only mean that.
What
Now,
does that mean?
I was hoping somebody would be an auditor, inquisitive. Remember, part of being an auditor is to be what? Inquisitive, right? Ask questions. Why are you doing that? Who's doing that? How many people do that? How come you do it? What are the steps in what you do? Who checks it? Who authorizes? See, that's what auditors do. And people and employees don't like that because sometimes they get stuck with answering questions because a lot of times they don't know. Nobody told them. They know, but they don't want to say. They know that something is wrong, but they can't. They don't want to tell. See all kinds of stuff. But if you're an auditor, you have to be able to answer all kinds of questions. Even if you're not an auditor, when you finish an audit class, you'd be inquisitive whether you're aware of it or not. When you go to work, subconsciously you're checking stuff around you. Checking people do. Even though you're not an auditor, you just work in whatever part of your job you work. But now you have this information. And so you don't just get rid of it once you get it. Some of it stays with you, especially if you have to like attend class, read stuff, study for exams and all that. A lot of it stays with you to your benefit. Okay. All right.
I don't
So
even
include.
know I didn't like my midterm exam. Excuse me. I still appreciate taking the time out to do the course.
I'm telling you, it's not only about your final thing, and it's amazing how people get stuck in the middle of things. That's the other thing. Does anybody know what's the name of our quarter miler? What's the name again? World famous quarter mile Olympian.
Oh, I don't know.
You guys don't know what the hell her name is? Sorry, I just say hell to get your attention. Nobody knows Shanae Miller?
Oh, yeah, we know what. We thought you were talking about foreigner.
Oh, no,
Yeah, we know Shawnee Miller Weibo.
yeah, Igbo.
Yeah, of course we know Shawnee.
Of course. Now, remember that famous dive to the finish line?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that when she dived to touch the line, so she didn't lose.
Why did she dive?
Because if she had to go forward, she would have lost.
And so she dived in order to?
When?
So she didn't care whether she got scratched up, lost the teeth, scraped her nose, nothing, right?
No.
No. Her goal was to what?
When?
Win. Did she give up in the middle of the race? Like, I'm losing, so I'm going to give up?
No, she didn't.
No, she didn't, class. Don't let midterms mess with you. Keep going until the end and pull a Shawnee if you have to dive. Does everybody get that?
I guess.
Okay. I can't make it any clearer than that. Those of us who stop in the middle of a midterm, we get stuck. We start stopping in the middle of everything. Don't do that. Go to the end and dive if you have to. Always remember that. I don't care what the hell it is. Okay. So, inclusive. 2 nights ago, I went online to pay one of my membership fees for one of my professional organizations that I'm a member of. When I was going through the information, there was a little note at the bottom of the application for payment that said, do you want to know why we use pronouns in our conversation? If you want to know, click here. Does everybody hear me so far?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir.
Now, this is a professional organization out of the UK. And they said, we use certain pronouns for a reason. If you want to know why we use them, click here. Now, Those of us who remember our English from grade 6 knows that a pronoun takes the place of a what?
And now
A
I think
noun.
if I remember,
Now.
Pronoun takes the place of a noun, like his and hers and theirs, correct? Now, they're saying, here's why we use those pronouns. Listen to me very carefully. I'm going to read something to you students. And then when I'm done, you can tell me what you think. Ready? Silence means yes.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. Here's what it says. You have arrived here, meaning me, because I clicked on it, because you've noticed the pronouns in my email signature. Listen very carefully. You may have noticed pronouns generally being used more in email signatures, online meetings, social media accounts, etc., etc. But if you don't have to think about your gender regularly, or you are not very familiar with the LGBTQ plus community, this may be unusual to see and could initially be a little confusing and or difficult to relate to. Now, this is at the bottom of my professional organization where I'm paying my membership fees for the year. They thought they should advise whoever it is of this. So we would like to tell you why at Wilmington PLC, that's the company processing the payment, our colleagues here are invited to share their pronouns in their email signatures online. People frequently refer to each other using pronouns. And often when speaking of someone in the third person, a gender is implied, such as he or she. Sometimes the gender association is not always accurate nor helpful. And often this is based on assumptions of the other person, such as their appearance or their name. Up until recently, the only pronouns most people had heard of were he, him, his, and she, her, hers. However, as the non-binary community has become more visible these days, more and more people are becoming aware of non-gendered pronouns such as they, them, theirs. Unfortunately, trans and non-binary people are often misgendered and at times even deliberately so by people like you, I guess. Using someone's correct pronoun is a way to respect them, just as using a person's name can be a way to respect them, which is why we here at this company share our pronouns so that everyone can feel comfortable sharing how they identify and be respected for that. Our CIS gender, which means someone whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth, colleagues, share their pronouns to enable those from the non-binary and transgender communities to feel more comfortable, seen, and recognized by all. We hope at this company that this simple act can lead us on the way to normalizing programs and making the world a more accepting and inclusive, Ebony, say your word, place for all. Now, before we go into our class today, I have one question. Does anybody know what they're talking about?
Yes.
What are they talking about?
Well, a lot of persons are, even though when they talk about the sign for gender, a lot of
Yeah.
persons, even though I'm born a female, they identify as a he as opposed to a she. And in some cases, they don't want to identify as either. So they decide and say, I'm just going to go with they, as opposed to saying I'm a male or a female.
It's
And
my
so what this particular company is saying is we're okay with showing that we are inclusive, and they're adapting to what the societal norm is at this point.
my. Okay, Danelle, for better or for worse, you are right in what you said. Couldn't put it better myself. Anybody else has any thoughts based on what Danelle has said? She's right. That's what that passage means. Any other thoughts? Hmm. Well,
I know that there was a situation with the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Brave Davis. He
yeah,
he had a press conference early this week,
yes,
and one of the reporters identified his particular administration as the queerest administration, and that
yes.
sparked some concern amongst the persons there, and it became a little bit of a back and forth between the persons that were attending the conference.
Indeed, indeed. I know exactly what you're talking about, Danelle. I remember that quite well. I wonder how many Bahamians have actually been witnessing that. Nobody had much to say about it um, for whatever reason. Uh, but one thing is certain, the whole thing is taking another turn, and it has finally gotten to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the little sleepy country nestled between Oh Lord and thank God. How we deal with that matter going forward is going to be very interesting, to say the least. And the reason why I raised it, because these things are going to impact you guys for the rest of your life. And the position you take in dealing with them will impact you for the rest of your life and the lives of your children. Okay? Everybody is entitled. Well, first of all, you might wonder, well, does this have anything to do with auditing? Yes, it does. Because if you have an auditor who is, I don't know, an other, then this might help you to communicate with that auditor who's an other. Because when the auditor comes in, you might say, she says, I'm not a she. And then you're like, really? What the hell? You look like a she? And she says, maybe I look like it, but I'm not that. I'm your auditor, and I'd rather you not refer to me as a she. And then you'll look startled and say, well, what should I call you? And then she'll tell you what to call her. Same with the he. So, does it
Can't say, you have to say it.
it? Yeah. So it's getting really weird now in the world, and it's now touching little island countries, nations like ours. And soon we're going to be pressed with the question of whether we are going to legislate same-sex marriages and whether same-sex marriages will take place in a Bahamian church for the first time in the history of this 500-year country jurisdiction since Columbus discovered the New World and all this crazy stuff that's coming for you youngsters and your children. Okay. Uh, Let me just say, I just threw that out for information because it is important and it will impact your lives. And you will have to decide what you are going to do about that and what you are going to tell your innocent children when they are born into this world. For me, I am old school. I'll tell you up front. I am old school. Though I am contemporary in my perspective, I am old school in my standard. And as far as I'm one of those persons who do not believe in abortion. I do not believe in same-sex marriages and relationships. I do not believe in all this non-binary LGBTQRST nonsense that people are now even suing people about, and be seeking to even murder you if you get in their way. That's how bad it's become. But that's only my position. I am old school. Okay. And what does old school mean? Old Bible school. And old Bible school says to me that God only created two types of people, male and female. And what I find interesting, if a plane goes down and they say how many men are dead and how many women, what do you do then? How do you know who's binary or trans or otherwise? Does anybody know? Like when you inspect the bodies, how are you going to know what the other is?
Based on their genitals.
Well, some of them are not going to have fake genitals. They're going to have the natural genitals and still calling themselves Tingum.
Well, they'll be dead.
So
They're gonna,
I know they'll be dead, but how do we identify them for the record?
we could identify them with the body, by the body. So the body shows.
Some of them will not show. They will have their original body parts and still say, I'm a girl.
Yeah, but then they see they crazy mind and gone on to be wherever they could be end up in the afterlife. So that don't matter.
I remember this question is not for the dead. It's like a funeral. Funerals are not for the dead. It's for the living to come together and do whatever we do. My thing is when we are creating a record of these people for the record, how do we classify? How do we know how to classify those who are not male or female? We're gonna have a problem, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
We're gonna have a problem in a lot of things, folks. And that's food for thought. That's what you guys have to deal with. And your children, what do you tell your children? When your little boy says, Mommy, am I a boy or girl? What are you gonna tell him? You're whatever you feel like being, Jonathan? Okay. But then that's me. I'm old school. And I intend to drop dead, be shot or blown up with it. But then that's just me. Okay. All right. Just thought I'd throw that out to you youngsters who are the future of the Commonwealth and who will be having children who will be the future of the Commonwealth. How about that? All right. So tonight we are going to talk about some practical applications. So far, we talked about internal controls and verification of assets and liabilities and all that good stuff. Tonight, we're going to talk about how do we apply some of these things in a practical way, in what situations, what types of assets and liabilities, so you can get some idea of how things happen in the real world in terms of all of these auditing concepts. Okay? And so we begin then, first of all, with the most important part of the balance sheet that is generally considered, and that is with the verification of assets. Anybody remembers from last class what verification means?
Mr. Wilkinson.
What is the meaning of verification?
Well, if I had to write that down and I wouldn't remember, I remember verification is, I guess, verifying that it's similar to voucher,
Similar but
or,
not.
or you have a third person checking the work to verify that certain things in place, information is correct.
Yeah, so when you're verifying, you're checking to see if it exists at all, if it's correct in the information that is given, and that the company, in fact, has possession and ownership of the asset, and that it is not charged off or being used as collateral for any particular purpose. That's what verification is all about, to find out what the characteristics are of those assets and that they are, in fact, what the company management says they are. But sometimes company management people lie, L-I-E. Did you know that? Did you guys know that?
So sometimes people in management die.
No, company management lie, L-I-E.
No.
You didn't know they
But
lie?
we know it now. We know it now after the class, after the
Wow.
course.
It's amazing Yeah, you guys have not gotten to the point where you actually see board members being conniving and fraudulent and lying and misleading and all this kind of stuff. The shareholders and misleading the the tax people and misleading the financial institutions who give them loans and all this kind of stuff by giving wrong information. Very common problem. Okay. So not all management people in companies are honest. Not all bishops in the church are honest. Not all politicians are honest. Do you follow, folks? And so, and again, auditing, the concept of auditing applies in all of those situations. It's just that not all of those situations subject themselves to being audited. And I wonder why. If you're not doing anything wrong, should you have a problem being audited, class? Anyone?
No, you shouldn't.
No, you shouldn't. If you've not done anything wrong, then you shouldn't have a problem with being audited, period. So whenever somebody who's in charge of money and assets and companies and any kind of entity, countries and churches and whatever, and they do not want to be subjected to scrutiny by auditors and members and others who want to know what's going on, that is food for thought. I don't care what they call themselves, because if you're not doing anything wrong, then you shouldn't have a problem responding favorably, answering questions, showing the relevant people the records, the bank account, and so on. But a lot of governments and politicians and companies and churches and charities and all that, they don't do that. They hide stuff. And so the question is, they even hide stuff when the auditors come to audit them. Depending on what they don't want the auditors to see, they hide it. They cook the books, they change numbers, they refuse to give all the information, all the files, all the data. How about that? Even to the actual auditors. And so imagine if company management is lying to auditors sometimes, what other people are doing who are not even subject to an audit. My. And yet you tell me that this stuff is not of value? You guys haven't seen the value of these last few weeks that you spent. That will come in time if you are so inclined to make it work for you. See? Wow. All right. So, what is our first practical application? Well, it has to do with what we call verifying assets. And the first asset that we're going to look at is the most liquid one, the one that people steal all the time, the one that tends to go astray if you don't watch it 24/7. Okay. I don't know if I gave you guys the example of the Chinese and the Bahamas. If you notice, if they're not cashing on the machine, whoever's cashing, somebody's always standing nearby. Have you noticed that? Anybody?
Yeah, I noticed that in these maps before.
Yeah. Did you ever wonder why they did that? Karen, why did they
Why?
do?
They
Well,
don't trust them, eh?
should they trust them?
No.
Why not? I know. See what I mean? You're absolutely right. You're definitely on the right track. Okay. Your answers are crisp and correct. And then as you get down to the real nitty gritty stuff, you get like, well, don't you know? And I know exactly what you mean. Because it's a very gray area. Okay. But really, the truth of the matter is they're watching them so they don't steal any of the money, not even one single dollar. Because you know, they say Chinese have a reputation for being cheap. And they don't want to lose a single dollar, they say. So they're watching all the time.
Yeah, but if they had better internal controls, then they wouldn't have to watch them all the time.
That's true, but they don't leave it to. I agree with you, absolutely. But they don't. They're old school. They don't check for no internal control. They are the internal control. What they stand up and watch all day. Haven't you noticed? Like when do they go to lunch? Anybody know? Seems like every time you go in there, they're standing. They must be eat lunch under the counter. I don't know, but yeah, if they were to put in some effective internal controls, they don't have to stand around all the time. But they don't do that. They've chosen that they are the internal control by standing and watching to make sure nobody slips anything in their bags. Nobody runs off with 2 bags of potato chip at the end of the workday and all that stuff. Watching everything. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what they do. On the other hand, there are some companies where they're not watching anything and they lose a lot of assets because people keep stealing from them because there are no controls in place. Nobody's watching and there are no controls. And that typically in any kind of entity equals a loss. Because sooner or later, when somebody discovers you're not watching and you don't have any internal controls in place, they're going to start stealing. Not everybody, because not everybody's a thief. But a certain percentage of persons will carry stuff, take stuff, run off with stuff. It's always been that way and will always be that way, unfortunately. So, how do we verify cash in a company or any other entity? So we've given some definitions of this cash thing. And if you notice, there's a whole long talk about cash because cash is the most liquid asset that is subject to all kinds of manipulation. And if you don't watch it, check it, double check it, triple check it, make sure you know where it is from start to finish, you will lose money. People will find a way to get some of that in their pockets every single week, month, year, decade, century. Okay? It's nothing new. People have been doing this forever. They're doing it, planning tomorrow's events as we speak. For sure. All right, so what do we mean then by checking cash in hand? What does the auditor mean or intend to do when they're checking cash in hand? Notice we are told right away on the cash in hand, special care, see, is required when verifying cash balances. Because people are always looking to manipulate it and run off with something. Always. Maybe not you guys, but somebody is always looking. Okay? There can be no certainty that the cash produced for inspection was in fact held by the custodian. In other words, people can do all kinds of things along the way between where the cash was originally by the time it gets to the auditor for verification. Oftentimes, the amount that is shown on the balance sheet in cash, by the time the cash count is completed, the cash in the bank is or in hand or together is nowhere near the total amount that is shown in the balance sheet. Sometimes auditors discover it is a fictitious number, nowhere near the actual cash position of the company. Okay. All right. So because of this, number 2 tells us that cash should not only be checked on the last day of the year for the audit, but also checked again sometime after the close of the year. Not only should it be checked, but it should be checked without giving notice. Notice to who? To the client who hired you, meaning the company shareholders, or even to the staff. In other words, it should be a surprise check so that people cannot manipulate the money, move it around. If something is short, move something from somewhere else and make it balance. And then when you finish checking that, you move it somewhere else and make that balance and all this crazy stuff. So auditors typically would want to go in and do a year-end cash count, and then shortly after in the new financial year, do another surprise cash count so that people don't have time to go back and fix anything. Okay, that's all part and parcel of the verification of assets, in this case, cash. Okay? Hence the meaning, practical application. What do you actually do in the real world? Number 3, notice if there's more than one figure in existence for a cash balance, meaning that the cashier has some money, petty cash has some money, the branch has some money, and whatever the case might be, money's all over the place. All of these categories where cash is being held should be counted together. And for those of you who may have been a teller in a bank, responsible for balancing cash, a cashier somewhere, or who may become those things in the future, these are definitely important things to know. Or you're supervising somebody who manages cash. You're not an auditor, you're a supervisor, somebody who manages cash. And so all of a sudden now you have some techniques that you can use to help you to manage that cash process. If you're not doing now, you may be doing it next year. Jobs change. Okay, that's the key. So if you have cash in a number of places, they all should be counted at the same time. Reason, so that you cannot cover any shortages from one end to the other end. Folks, once they get set into how they're going to defraud the company, they come up with ingenious ways to do it. Okay? So one, let's say the cashier's till is short by 500. If you're not checking the other stuff at the same time, they'll then take 500 from petty cash or the impress system or whatever, put it in to make that balance. And when that is done, whatever else is short, put it in there to make that balance and do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Excuse me, Mr. Wilkinson.
Yes.
Question. Okay, so I do some petty cash auditing, right? And I always know when I put in report cash impress, what that means. I Google it, but what it means in layman terms, please.
Yeah, cash impressed.
Uh-huh.
Cash impressed is usually what we refer to as petty cash.
Okay. That's another word for petty cash.
That's another word for petty cash. And the reason why we call it impressed, because whenever petty cash is established, we'll say the petty cash account will be $500, yes?
Correct.
And usually, once we establish the petty cash amount, let's say in this case $500, then we pressed it on the system. In other words, we book it on the general ledger at 500 and it never changes. That's what impressed means. Like putting on a tattoo, it stays. That's what the word impressed means. We open it up for 500, it stays at that figure.
Oh,
Correct?
okay, I got you. Correct. Okay.
Follow that now? Yeah, and that's kind of where the term impress comes from. And so if you use up $450 of petty cash, what do you normally do? Quickly. You do.
You have to what you say? If you use up more than how much? 500?
Use 450, what do you have to do?
You have to request a cash replacement for the voucher.
Why do you do that?
And then you have to help because it's an impress, like you said, and it has to stay at that amount. But if it get too low or whatever, then your systems have to be able to match off.
Correct. When you're almost at 500, you replenish it.
Right.
Check, put the money back. That if you spend 450, you put the 450 back along with the 50 that's there. Take it back to 500. Whatever you spend the money on, they're expensed, whatever it is. Okay.
Right.
They're added as expenses. So that's how your impress system works. And so
Okay.
that's one of the accounts that auditors will check along with any other cash balances throughout the organization, for sure. Because the impress system can be used for a lot of fraudulent activity. People can use it for gas money, lunch money, going away to Fort Lauderdale money, fix the radiator money, whatever it is, take it out, use it, and say when payday comes, you're going to put it back and so on. Some put it back, some do other stuff. Okay, but the idea is if you're checking it regularly, see, question as an auditor especially, you're checking it regularly, it'll cause you people not to be thinking about taking some out and trying to put it back. If people are watching you to see how often you check it. Did you know that, Gretchen?
Yeah, I figure. Because it's still a sketch of that though.
Good. That sounds good. That means that your job is doing what it's supposed to do. Okay. The key is to keep checking so that people know. And even though in case we keep checking, people still try to take a chance, depending on how serious they think their situation is. Okay. So it's very important to check all the cash at the same time so that nobody can play around with cash in no other places to manipulate so that things balance that don't really balance the cash. The other important thing that the auditor must do, or if you're a supervisor, or if you're an internal auditor, or you're responsible for cash, making sure cash is in order, period. the cashier or the person who's responsible for that cash must be there on the spot when you're counting. In this case, the auditor or supervisor or whomever's there verifying cash. You have to be there. And when you finish counting, you have the cashier, teller, etc., sign off saying that you agree that the cash in the till was X amount of dollars. Very important, because if that cashier is not there and something goes missing, you say it's short as an auditor, the cashier will say, well, I don't know how come, because all of it was there. Does everybody get that? Everybody understand how that works? Why the auditor must have the cashier present during the count?
Yes.
Absolutely. And if you don't think this is serious, if you ever get a job where you're responsible for overseeing cash and you do not watch that job carefully, it could cost you your job. Or worse. Because sometimes cashiers and tellers and others can set you up, like you move the money because you got so friendly, you stop having them there when you're checking the cash. And so what they do is they take out $300 or $500, and then since they know that you're not going to insist that they be there, when it comes up short, who do you think they're going to say took it? Anyone? Who do you think they're going to say took it?
The
Yeah.
auditor.
Yeah, or the auditor or teller supervisor or whoever is counting without that person present. So please, if you're an internal auditor, your teller supervisor, your checker of cash, make sure they're there. Don't let them walk away. Suppose in the middle of the cash count, the teller or such person says, I need to pee. What do? Keep counting, I'll be right back. What do?
Lock up and then wait for her to come back.
But she said, I can't wait, I have to go now, I'm gonna pee myself up. Why don't just keep counting until I get back?
You have to lock up, you
No.
have to lock up her stuff and then you wait until she comes back.
Simple. No matter how she pleads, like her bladder's gonna burst. Too bad. Let it, whatever.
Trying to stretch her right off.
You never know. Okay? All right. So yes, if she insists, or even he, because sometimes guys have a little rush every blue moon too. Whatever or they faking it, whatever the case might be. Make sure they lock up and you move away from the till, they have their key. Or you nearby until they get back. Do not let them leave you with their stuff, their key, their till open, and all that nonsense. Okay? Because sometimes people plan things in advance. They know you're coming to cash count. And so they might come up with a rules so you could be there where they're not there. And then they already knew that they took out $400 because they knew you were coming to count cash. They knew that you're there, they know that you're their friend. They know that they could persuade you to keep counting until they can't come right back. See, and so on. But one thing is certain, when it's time to be arrested by the police, people are not so friendly towards you anymore, no matter how much of a friend they said they were. Okay? That's an interesting thought. Again, if the auditor cannot check balances on the day of the balance sheet, they should arrange to have this done when? As quickly as possible, and in the meantime, all the money should be deposited in the bank so that there can be a formal record and stamp by the bank that the money has been secured. Some company have safes to put it in, blah, blah, blah. Nothing wrong with that. Make sure two people verify it, sign off the amount of money that's going into the safe. But of course, it's even better if you can bank it, for obvious reasons. All these things apply to cash because cash is very liquid. Cash is easy to steal and manipulate. And if you're not on your game, even your best friend will make you look bad or even have you arrested so that they can run off with some money that they think they need. Okay? Cannot be too careful. One of the other things auditors need to check are cash payments and receipts to make sure that they tie back to the counting of cash. This is a very important process because any part of the cash count that is omitted, people will take note of that. And when you come next year, they will find ways to get around the system because they know you're not checking certain things. Wow. Notice when the cash book or voucher or document or wherever the cash is counted, cash sheet, the balances that are counted are signed and verified by the auditor to indicate that the cash balance was properly and completely checked. Okay? Very serious process. Again, if there are any checks included or drafts in the cash count, these amounts of cash checks and drafts should be included or at least disclosed. They're not actual cash, but they should be brought to the fore so that they can be secured. Remember, if you don't secure your cash and drafts, people will actually take them and deposit them and take the money. Happens all the time. All right. So the auditor has a big job messing with cash. A lot of detailed work to do messing with cash. A lot of things to check to make sure you cover all the cash accounts. Because if people discover you're not checking all the cash accounts, they will start monitoring you. Staff members are quite shrewd, by the way. Not all of them are involved in skullduggery. I'm just talking about that handful who is always seeking and lurking and planning to run off with assets, including your personal assets if you give them a chance. Okay? So, where do we keep all this information? In the cash book, in the file, where we record these transactions. Of course, they must always be signed off in each case by the cashier, teller, etc., and the auditor. The auditor does not do these things, these verification checks, all of them tail to back. And if the auditor does not have the cashier or such person sign off, and the auditor does not sign off him or herself, they can find themselves in jeopardy. Remember all this paper and vouchers and all that stuff signed off by relevant people? They represent secondary information that goes into that file for secondary information. And you leave it there. 3 to 5 to 7 years until it's time to dispose of them. Typically, does anybody know the statute of limitations is in the Bahamas for credit? Anybody knows?
I don't feel like they have none.
7
I know
years.
it's supposed to be 7 years, but I don't feel like they implement that.
Who said
They
7?
implemented 7 years.
Who said 7 years?
They know.
No, yeah. How
If
do you
7
know?
years,
They know. How do you know it's 7 years?
because that's
Because
required by
I
law.
took I had to take I had to take some persons to court, and it's a limitation to 7 years.
Good.
And what you would find is that a place like Commonwealth Bank,
Yeah.
so that if the statute of limitations is basically finished, they would
Yeah.
offer you more credit so that they can take you to the court on the old balance.
Yes. And experience is a hell of a thing, isn't it, Dana? Because notice she can speak with authority on this issue because she's actually been there, done that. Okay? Yes. Commonwealth Bank, and they're not the only bank or lending institution, but they're famous, but they're not the only ones. If the statute of limitations, which is 7 years for loans, have passed, they will try to give you new credit or try to get you to make a payment on your account in some form or another so that they can renew the old credit that they had 7 years to collect. Okay? Of course, once that time passes, they can no longer legally claim any money that is outstanding, even though they'll give you the impression that they can.
Well, right, but how they can do that and talk with get you to do credit and then take you back to court and all if your statute of limitation already passed? I don't understand that.
I know. What they will do is they'll say, if you need a new loan for like a car, or vacation, or whatever, we'll give it to you. And they'll do one of two things. They will refinance it and say, we'll add your old balance into it. because people may not know. And once they add that in, then you're stuck. Or they might give you a new credit, use some of the proceeds to apply to the old, and say you've started making payments on it again. So therefore now they can take a renewed action against you. Unfortunately, a lot of borrowers are not aware of these things. Okay? Certainly. Thank you, Danielle. That's an excellent point, and it's something important to know by all means. Okay? Even it's important for the auditor to know, because the auditor might discover that the company they're auditing might have a loan facility on which the statute of limitations are passed once they start checking loan documents. Do you follow, everyone? So all of a sudden the auditor says, wait a minute, you're no longer liable for this. The statute of limitation of past, you haven't made any payments, the bank haven't write it down, nobody has sued you, you're in the clear on this one. And that's part of the auditor's work, okay, for sure. Now, so far, we've seen the kinds of things auditors check when cash is on hand, meaning inside the company's vault, drawer, generally sitting around in the company, safe, whatever the case might be. Okay, but then we also sometimes have cash in transit. Cash in transit meaning money's moving from point A to point B. That's why we refer to it as remittance in transfer. Okay. Remittance has to do with making payouts or moving cash for one reason or the other. So what is this cash in transit thing now? First of all, we just talked about how the auditors should check a bunch of things for cash in hand. Now they need to check a bunch of things for cash in transit, cash that's moving. Okay. And by definition, it simply refers to any amount of money that is sent by the branch or some depot where you keep cash, if you're selling water or some other product, some agency or some kind of cash being held to your head office. So you're sending it from our outskirts, such as a branch, to your head office. Okay. Of course, when the audit is being conducted, the auditor needs to know, where is that money in transit? Is it at the branch or depot? Is it at the office yet? Or is it somewhere in the middle moving? Leaving one point and going to the other point. And if the auditor does not consider this fact, cash in transit could be missed out of the cash count. That's an important issue. So you could have a couple of $1 million in transit, and if the auditor is not aware of this, not asking about this, management doesn't say anything, then a couple $1 million can go by unchecked for whatever reason. So cash in transit is an interesting twist to cash in hand. At least cash in hand, you have it, your possession. And people still find ingenious ways to get it from you. Okay? Even if they get it at gunpoint, that's the point. All right. So whenever we're sending anything in transit from one point to the next, the verification process must exist so that somebody's watching and signing from start to finish. Okay. And when it gets to its destination, somebody has to verify it to be what the original destination said it was. So when it gets to you, you have to call your originating destination and say, what did you get? And they said 17,500,000. Oh, okay, I'm off by 200,000. What happened in transit? Somebody slow down somewhere and throw some in the bush, whatever the case might be. So even in money in transit has to be watched. The matter is, cash has to be watched at all times. The practical application for cash is watch, watch, watch. Check, 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 and pray that you've done enough. As an auditor, internal or external, and as an employee, to make sure that you're not in the middle of some sad story that somebody who's run off with the money and you don't know what happened. Wow. What about reconciliations? of these accounts. Very important. If 300 million was supposed to come from point A, head office or branch or to go to another point, but once it gets to that point, it has to be reconciled or checked to make sure that the denominations that were sent originally are the very same ones that were received. Okay? Absolutely, reconciliation. Because we know, just like being married, whenever you can't reconcile, that's trouble. Same thing with a company. If you're checking cash and you can't reconcile it, that's trouble for someone. Okay, for sure. All right. What about the amount deposited into the bank? If you're an auditor and you say, well, how much was deposited this afternoon? And you say, 2.5 million. Should you just accept the employees or management's answer? The answer is no. If they say that's what it is, you tell them, can I see the deposit slip? Then the deposit slip should indicate what was actually deposited. Of course, collusion is a tricky thing because you can get somebody to the bank to stamp it and put in the wrong amount. Remember, I already told you from previous times that collusion is hard to detect. Okay? Make no mistake, when two or more people get together to plan something, it's very hard to detect it. Okay? And then finally, the other item that's in transit that needs to be checked is that whatever is in transit, as it moves from one party, one transaction, whatever transactions occur, they should be checked, verified, and posted accordingly. For example, in 5, you told the auditor must ensure that the entry for remittance in transit, stuff moving from point A to point B, is passed by only one party, and as such reversed in the next year so that the correct amount can be on the books. Why do we say one party? Because in this case, if a couple of people are messing around with it, it's subject to error and or manipulation. Okay. Before I go on, let me just make sure we have all the soldiers in the room. Rose, are you there? Rose has been noticeably absent. I wonder what happened there. Okay. So, Gretchen, since you handle petty cash checks, why don't we start our evening read back with you and see the verification of petty cash by the auditor. That's you anyway. Gretchen, are you there?
I'm still here, even though I'm sleepy.
Why are you sleepy? Why are you sleepy?
I ain't gonna lie, my birthday was on Tuesday, so
Which Tuesday?
just gone.
And as a result of that, what madness went down?
I didn't catch myself after, so I can tell you.
Now,
Yes, I just fun. You had to find the upload page.
let me tell you a secret, Gretchen, for you and your colleagues. When you are in school, you're not supposed to celebrate anything. You're supposed to suffer, not celebrate.
Yeah,
You're not supposed to have any parties. You're not supposed to go
I
out.
don't know party.
Well, I know what you mean. You're not supposed to go out and do anything wild. You're not supposed to stay home and do anything wild. You're not supposed to go traveling off to Fort Lauderdale having fun. Whatever it is people do for their birthdays. You're supposed to just study, read, and review. And tell the
Y'all ain't going to cash at hand, right?
sorry?
These things y'all ain't going to cash at hand, petty cash.
No, we haven't gone to petty cash yet. We're on petty cash. That's where I want you to start. See,
No, but
petty
see, Okay.
Yep.
Fine. Okay. C for petty cash.
Mhm.
Petty cash in hand should be verified with petty cash book. Check the balance of the petty cash account in the general ledger. 3, vouch the transaction for the previous month to ensure that fictitious payments are not made. The steps used for verification of cash in hand are also applicable for petty cash.
Okay, so whatever you do for petty cash, the same applies for cash in hand. The same steps apply to petty cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, keep going.
Bank balance. To verify cash at bank, the auditor should examine the bank's passbook and compare it with the balance shown in the bank column of the cash book. Check bank reconciliation statement with bank statement, passbook for the subsequent period. The auditor should get a confirmation from the bank regarding balance at the bank directly from the bank. Ensure that the balance shown in the cash book is brought into the balance sheet as cash and bank and not balance as shown by the passbook. The auditor should also ensure that the check outstanding and checks not yet collected are genuine and not made up in order to conceal a deficiency. If some of these checks are more than 6 months old, he should make inquiries and have them reversed in the books of accounts.
Why should we do that? What's wrong with checks that are 6 months old or more?
They still dated.
You're still dated, for those of you who may not have known that yet. Okay, all right, keep
And
going.
they shouldn't be on it. They should be reissued if need be.
Yeah, after 6 months, if you haven't cashed it, no bank should cash it. You have to take it back to whoever drew the check and have them give you a new check. Okay, period. All right, keep going.
If there is more than one bank account, such as dividend account
What about
and
number,
interest.
number 6 first?
Oh, I missed something. Sorry. Cash and fixed deposits with the bank can be verified by examining the deposit receipt or getting a certificate from the banker.
Okay,
If there is more than one bank account, such as dividend account and interest account, all such accounts should be checked and the balances should be verified the same day. Information regarding their balances should also be obtained from the bank directly.
yep. Mm-hmm.
If the bank account shows an adverse balance and the client has deposited security for the overdraft, the auditor should inquire from the bank the particulars of the security and the amount of interest charged.
Anybody knows what an overdraft is?
It's like something like a credit you get on your checking account.
Yeah, it's a loan against your checking account that the bank will allow you to write checks for an amount over and above how much you have in your account. And of course, you have to find deposits to put back in the overdraft account to bring it back down.
And they make money from a charge.
Of course, that's what we're talking about right there. Interest charges, very high interest charges too, 18%. Okay, so it's a very expensive exercise and you should only get an overdraft if you absolutely need it. All right, keep going.
Bills receivable. The auditor should examine the bills receivable book with the bills receivable not matured, but in hand on the date of the balance sheet. When any bills are in the process of collection, the details of the same have to be verified with bank certificates. If the bills receivable in hand are many, the auditor should make a list of bills for his convenience.
What do you guys think bills receivables are? What does it sound like? Just from what it sounds like.
Like you receive a like a bill to pay?
Well,
No?
kind of the opposite of that. In other words, in accounting, whenever you have a receivable, it means that somebody owes you money.
Okay.
Okay, something
What
to,
kind, what example of a bill receivable?
a bill receivable might be if somebody comes to borrow money from you, you have them sign a bill saying, a bill saying, I, John Doe, agree to pay Gretchen $1,000 that I borrowed on the 31st of July, 2022. That would be like your promissory note. That's your bill receivable. That means that on the 31st of July, you're expecting for that bill receivable to be what? Paid, correct?
Okay.
Okay. So that would be kind of an example of a bill receivable. But any receivable that is outstanding for a company is money owed to the company. Anybody knows what we call the account that month where the company owes money?
What you call what?
We call an account when the company owes money.
Payable.
Accounts payable?
Accounts payable. Okay. All right. Some important little snippets to know. Audit or no audit. All right. Keep going.
If there are any bills that have been discounted and still not matured, he has to examine the details of the same very carefully and should confirm with the bank because they are to be shown as contingent liabilities by way of a note in the balance sheet.
Anybody ever heard that expression before? Contingent liability?
I don't know.
Probably
I mean,
not.
there's a possibility that it might not be paid.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why did you say you don't know that answer the question?
I don't know. Because I mean, it also makes sense to me. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just my thought process. But
yeah, a contingent, because that the reason why, because you heard that somewhere in your lifetime. That's why it didn't just crop up. Okay, a contingency is something that may or may not happen. It's like getting married. When you get engaged, are you sure you're gonna get married? Anyone?
no, only some people sure.
Some people like who?
Said who's trying to get married.
But they're not. But you're not sure until when.
Until that happens, you sign a register.
And
Say
they
I
start
do.
planning.
Sorry,
And they start planning.
planning means you're gonna get married.
I mean, yeah, because if you won't plan it or talk about it, then you just be engaged for a pay.
I know, Karen. I'm so Karen. I'm so happy you
Yeah.
said. I'm so happy you said that because a lot of people believe that once they get engaged, that they're gonna get married. They believe that once they start planning, that's worse than engaged. They're definitely gonna get married then. But once the dress is purchased, that oh my God, way I can't get married anymore. And generally speaking, that's true, but doesn't happen all the time. So sometimes people still don't get married after all that. Sometimes people are left at the altar still. The bride or the groom does not show up. So a contingency is something that may or may not occur, depending on the situation. If it's a contingent liability, it means that it's a debt that you may or may not have to pay. For example, if somebody sues the company, you follow? And somebody sues the company, you're not going to know what the company has to pay until the court decides whether the company is winning or losing. So until then, it's a contingency. If you lose, then you have to pay. So now you have a liability, you have to pay. If you win, then you have a contingency where you don't have to pay and you get away with not having to pay for any liabilities as declared by the court. Okay? So that's a nice little expression to know, contingent liabilities, even for your own personal life. Okay? And so whenever these things show up in the financial statement, the auditor has to check whenever they see that expression, contingent liability. The first question they have to ask is, what does this refer to? What is the contingency? What's going to happen if you win or lose? Where's the documentation in support of this stuff? Who's the person that's suing you? And so on. Okay? All of that coming out of the existence of a contingent liability. Some company management know that they have these potential lawsuits that could cost the company money, but they don't disclose it to the auditor, they hide it because contingent liabilities do not show up on the balance sheet, nor profit and loss statement. You have to put it in the notes. And if you don't put it in the notes of the financial statements, nobody will know. It's called non-disclosure or hiding. All right, keep going.
Number 5, while examining the bills, the auditor has to pay special attention to see that they are properly drawn up, stamped, and duly accepted. He has to check to see whether any bills is overdue. If so, the auditor should ask for the details of the action initiated, etc. If there are any bills which are doubtful for recovery, he should see whether any adequate provision has been made for the anticipated loss on accounts of bad debts. He has to see that in case of dishonored bills, the same is not shown as bills receivable. The auditor also has to determine whether all formalities have been properly complied with or not.
By the way, a dishonored bill is a bill receivable that is not paid. So somebody, if you have a bill receivable, somebody owes you money. If they don't pay you, we say that the bill has been dishonored. Okay? All right, keep going.
Where the auditor has visited his client after the balance sheet date, many of the bills due on the balance sheet date might have matured or were honored. Hence, the auditor has to vouch such bills with the cash book or passbook and reconcile the balance. I see why these need to be accountants.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to be, you could be an okay internal auditor if you're auditing everything except accounting records. If you're auditing everything except accounting records, you don't necessarily have to have an accounting background. You don't have to be a CPA to be a fairly good internal auditor. Okay, you could do a couple of accounting classes, and that would be sufficient for you to audit as an internal auditor an average firm. Okay, but once you get into the nitty gritty of large corporate firms and those kinds of companies with all kinds of different goods and services that they provide, definitely more advanced accounting skills would be required in order to do those audits effectively. Okay, all right, keep going.
Right. If the bill has been renewed after the balance sheet date, then the value of the original bill due on the balance sheet date should be shown as bill receivable and interest on renewed bills properly accounted. If bills endorsed have been dishonored, the original drawee is to be debted and endorsee is to be credited.
I know that's a bunch of accounting mumbo jumbo again, but basically they're saying if you are expecting to be paid and you're not paid because whoever owed you money does not, then you have to reverse the entry. You're not showing that you are still waiting to be paid, but in fact you already know that you will not be paid. Some companies bill receivables are actually they're not honored and they have to write them off, and they do not write them off if they want the receivable to stay on the balance sheet to make the books look better. See, window dressing, and they actually are. They don't want to take it off and say that it's been dishonored. They want to leave it there and give the appearance that things are great on the asset side of the company balance sheet. Okay, keep going.
Loans advance. Loans may be of many different types. For example, A, loans against the security of land and buildings. B, loans against the security of goods. C, loans against the security of stocks and shares. D, loans against the security of insurance policies. And E, loans against the personal security of the borrower.
And for all of you in this class, I don't know who's ever borrowed money before from a financial institution or who's ever loaned money by being a loan officer or such thing in a financial institution. Either way, whether you're a borrower or a lender, these little things are important things to know. Okay? If you are looking to buy a home one day, the bank will be holding your home as collateral. That's what we mean by loans against the security of land and building. And the auditor again has to check these things to make sure that these loans exist for companies. Okay? If you're a company and you want to buy inventory, the bank may say, fine, we'll give you the $500,000 that you want to buy Christmas stuff, but whatever inventory is in your store, the bank will take possession, the bank will hold that as collateral in the event that you do not pay off the $500,000. Okay? So these are all securities that are to back or secure loans that are given by financial institutions, all of which, when they exist in the company, the auditor needs to check to make sure that they actually exist. Remember, we talked about fake loans, okay? And people are still preparing loans for sure. Okay, keep going.
Therefore, in each case, the duty of the auditor is as follows. 1, to verify whether the memorandum and articles provide for the granting of loans. 2, to examine whether a proper loan ledger has been maintained and whether it is up to date or not. 3, to examine whether security is lodged against each loan. The loan agreement is to be scrutinized regarding the rate of interest, due date, payment dates, penalties, interest, etc. 4, to ascertain whether any loan is doubtful of recovery, in which case a provision for the expected loss is to be made. 5, except in the case of a banking or finance company, auditor has to ascertain whether the purpose for advancing a loan is connected with business or not.
Thank you, Gretchen. Fantastic for taking us to this point. Let me just say something for you guys while you're getting ready to study for your final. Remember my questions, maybe if you remember anything from my midterm exam, remember my questions would be very specific to topical issues. For example, I may say when an auditor is examining company loans, what 2 types of things might he be looking for? I mean, we have a couple here, but you just pick 2. Loans, you'll be looking to see if there are any loans against land and see if there are any loans against goods and so on. Remember, your answers do not have to be verbatim exactly as it is in the text. Once you get the general understanding of the response, be careful with that. How does the auditor go about checking these things? You don't have to remember all the details, okay? In your short notes for study, you just put review the memorandum, see? You don't have to say, or just put review memorandum and articles. You don't have to say review memorandum and articles provide for the granting of loan. You don't have to say it, remember all that. 1, review memorandum and articles. 2, examine the ledger. 3, examine whether security is lodged. See, simple. And that's what your short note should be. Your short note should not be all this other detail because we've already talked about that and exhausted that. And so I'm not going to berate you with the details like that. I just want to make sure that you understand the basic principles. Okay, so be careful when you're doing your note keeping. Make sure your topics are clear and your notes are short. And when I say short, I don't mean as short as this. Chicken. That doesn't tell me anything either. That's not what I mean. It has to be short enough that you can remember it easily enough and it conveys the meaning without having to have all the detail. Please remember that. Try it. See what happens. All right. Karen, are you there?
I am here, but I am to work.
Are you at work?
I being a slave right now.
You're at work still?
Yeah,
What the hell are you doing there still?
working overtime.
Point well taken. And since they're going to be benefiting from all your blood, sweat, and tears, then tell them no more to you. Because they're going to
Yeah,
be
wow.
a beneficiary of all this stuff you're doing anyway. Especially in
Mhm.
that place, you'll need a lot of these auditing techniques to survive. And
Yes, yes.
I know.
We
Okay.
get like we got must be like 30 applications for credit card because they having a little special for staff who gets a credit card. And none of these applications have IDs, but they told us to still do it
Why don't they have IDs?
because they said because they are staff. But then we don't know all the staff,
No, you don't.
but we still have to do them.
Well, I suspect what will happen is since the staff, hopefully, even though they may not get them immediately, that they'll have somebody whose job will be to get the information anyway. Because yeah, like
I
we say
hope so.
sometimes sometimes we say, oh, there's staff, and then guess what happens? Somebody is fired or leaves, and you still don't have the ID, so no, they're no longer staff.
Mhm.
And so where are you now? You have a dilemma because now they're no longer staff. You don't have an ID. Only some Tingham who knows Tingham can remember who that was, and it gets complicated. Just as simple as that. So yeah,
Mhm.
ideally you should get it up front, even though it's staff. But hey, hopefully they'll make provisions to get it eventually. All right, let's go. Karen. Karen, you're up.
Okay, hold on one second.
Yeah, we're on loans against the security of land and building.
Yeah, give me 1 second to solve. I was working and listening. Um,
Should be paid on your module, I think.
I ain't glass. Okay.
Well, let me ask you, can you actually read where you are?
If I could read where I am, I mean, I on my computer. I have my computer in class, and I use my computer to type.
I mean, like there's nobody around looking at you funny because you're reading.
Oh yeah, I have my coworker here with me. I don't know why is the attachment not opening? Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Let me see if I can download this. Hold
Yeah.
on.
We're holding, we're dealing with this contingency. See that word again? I told you learning is never a waste of time. This is a contingency. Will it open or not? And whether or not you read will be contingent on whether it opens, correct?
Right.
See, contingent, that same word. Just saw it a minute ago. One of the reasons why organizations don't like contingencies because they make you wait. You don't know how long it's going to be before it comes to fruition.
Where we is now?
We're on page 6 in the module, loans against security of land and building.
Loans against the security of land and building.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Let me start.
Hey,
The auditor has to examine the mortgage deed to see if the deed has been properly executed and registered in favor of the client. Number two, the auditor has to examine the title deeds deposited with the mortgage deed. The auditor, if required, has to examine the appraiser certificate in order to ascertain the value and sufficiency of the security. The auditor has to confirm that the property is properly insured and insurance premiums have been paid as agreed. The auditor has to examine the property title. If the mortgage is a second mortgage, the auditor has to confirm that the same was brought to the attention of the first mortgagee. In this case, he has to rely on the acknowledgement of title deed from the first mortgagee.
let me ask you
B,
guys, before you go on, Karen, say this to the class. Does anybody know what a second mortgage is? Anybody know what a first mortgage is?
I mean, like if you take out a mortgage on an existing home, or they don't call that equity, right?
If you take out a mortgage and what happens?
If you already have a mortgage and then you take out a second mortgage on a home or business or you
Yeah.
put something up.
No, what happens is if you have a first mortgage on your home or business for $150,000 and something comes up and the bank who has your first mortgage says they can't do it, they can't give you the extra money. So you're like, I need it. So you find another financial institution and say to them, I have enough equity in my home. Can you give me a second mortgage against the same property? And some lending institutions will say, hell no, our policy is not to do second mortgages, too risky. because at the end of the day, we don't get to collect until the first mortgagee collects. And so, but some financial institutions, they don't have a problem giving a second mortgage. So they'll go ahead and give you a loan and take a second mortgage out against your property, which means now two financial institutions have an interest in your property. So if something goes wrong, your property will be sold and all two of them will be paid off. And if anything is left, then you'll get the difference. Sometimes it's only enough to pay the first mortgage, and the second mortgage company gave the second mortgage, they don't get anything, or they only get a couple of bucks, which means that you, as a client, don't get anything out of the deal. So second mortgages can be tricky if something goes wrong, and so we typically don't see a whole lot of those things happening, but they do occur from time to time. All right, keep going.
Okay, B, loans against the security of goods. Sorry. The auditor has examined the nature of the goods and confirmed that the goods really belong to the borrower. He should see whether the loan is granted against a railway receipt, lorry receipt, or dock warrant.
Now,
Number two,
does
okay.
anybody like say to themselves, a railway receipt, what the hell is this? Well, the reason why we have those expressions because some of these notes were taken out of a UK text, audit text, and so some of the words are not words we see in this part of the world. These are like British expressions, railway receipt, lorry. What do we call a lorry in the Bahamas? We don't call them a lorry. What do we call them? Starts with T. No, a stinking truck is speeding all the time. That's what the Brits call a lorry. Okay?
A ticket?
Truck.
Oh,
Oh, sorry,
okay.
not lottery. Lorry, Lorry. That's the British
Hmm.
expression for a truck. Okay, in case you wonder.
Okay.
All right, keep going.
Okay. In cases where goods are stored in a rental facility, he has to ensure that the rent is paid in full and the goods are fully insured. The auditor should examine the value of the goods by comparing them with the present market value. Regarding quality and quantity, he may rely on the inspector's report. If the goods are of perishable nature, the auditor has to examine the turnover of the stock of the client.
What does perishable mean, anyone? What does perishable mean?
Items that have a lifespan,
What kind of lifespan?
short,
Correct. Example?
apple, orange, cabbage,
Absolutely.
potato.
Yeah, fruits and vegetables are all
Yeah.
perishable. Absolutely. Is oil perishable?
You said oil?
Oil.
No,
W-
oil has been in the cupboard for long, and I could store and heat.
Yeah, cooking oil, cooking oil, is that perishable?
No, because it have a longer lifespan, and it doesn't have a short lifespan.
Well, no, it definitely has a long lifespan. Some people have cooking oil in their cupboards until I don't know when, and still cook with it because it hangs out a long time. Unlike fruits and vegetables, you have to eat them quickly or they will destroy themselves, for sure. All right, keep going, Karen.
Okay. Loans against the security of stocks and shares. He should call for a statement of stocks and shares given as security and confirm that all of them are fully paid. He should see whether an instrument of transfer is properly stamped and is properly executed. He should see that their value is properly disclosed as per the prevailing market rate. He should see, he has to ensure that there is sufficient margin on the loans advance. He has to see whether the charge is properly registered or not.
Doesn't it dawn on anyone like, wow, it's a lot of checking? But wherever you work, whether it's Bank of the Bahamas or the insurance company or any other company, rest assured that whenever your auditors come in, this is what they're doing, depending on the nature of the business. Not necessarily all of these things together. It varies depending on the nature of the business, but all these checks essentially have to be done in one form or another. And they're checking you. They're checking employees. They're checking your work. They're checking to see if you're following through with company policy and procedure. They're checking to see if tellers are balancing regularly. They're checking all kinds of things. They're checking to see if loans on the books actually exist. And in this case, for example, if there are any stocks and shares involved, they have to check for the existence of those stocks and shares. And if there are any loans outstanding against them, they need to find out how much, with whom, and why, etc. Okay, a lot of checking, because that's what an audit is, a hearing or checking of information, remember, to ensure that what management says it is, that it is. Okay, for sure. The only reason why auditors come in is so that an independent party can check it, and the government and shareholders and others and banks do not have to rely on management's word alone. They will have the management's word that everything is okay, but they'll also have the independent auditors who will verify these things and say, yeah, pretty true and fair view. We had a little blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, these things exist. They're doing things within a reasonable way. And so, yeah, they're happy with the nature, the way they're running this. All right, keep going.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so loans against the security of insurance policies. The auditor should see that the policy is at 2 years old, is at least 2 years old. The auditor should confirm that all premiums have been properly paid and the policy is in force by examining the latest premium receipt. The auditor should ascertain that due notice of assignment has been given to the insurance company. The auditor should see that the loan has been advanced on the basis of a surrender value of the policy as certified by the insurance company. The auditor has to ensure that the premium, if any, paid up by the lender to keep the policy in force is properly debited to the loan account of the borrower together with the usual interest.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that. Volunteering to read under duress. That's what I call multitasking, okay, for sure. So
Certain.
it is, if you could do all this crap, there's no way you could throw in any towel, okay, for sure. I'll personally call the cops. All right, it's not over until the fat lady sings, okay. Now I noticed that Karen, there was a word that when I was a youngster, I don't know if I told you guys that story, GROWTH. I was in a debating contest when I was in high school in Form 3. That's like grade 9 or 10. And I was in a debating contest and I saw the judges smiling at me. And every time I said this word, GROWTH. And then they didn't say anything. They waited until afterwards. And then they said, Mr. Wilkinson, you have had made a great presentation, you had great arguments, etc. But we'd just like to let you know, for future reference, that the word GROWTH is not groweth, it's growth. Anybody knows that one? So they were smiling because I was saying groweth. I was pronouncing the TH at the end for some reason. But that's what you do when you're 14, you're learning. And so I know it seems unconnected, but it is connected. All right, thank you so much, Karen. Who's next on my, Ebony, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, fantastic. Then you can pick up where Karen so boldly left off. I think she finished at E.
Mhm.
Yeah, loans against the personal security of the borrower, and then you can go from there.
Okay, the auditor has to examine documents like promissory notes, guarantors, details, and the salary certificates of the borrower. Sundry debtors. Sundry debtors represent the amount of recoverable from the customers for sale of goods and rendering of services. The The undermentioned procedure should be applied for the verification of book debts or sundry debtors after receiving a schedule or list of debtors from the client. Direct confirmation of balances from debtors by sending confirmation letters, year-end scrutiny of ledgers,
Mhm.
verification of debts considered bad or doubtful, compliance with legal requirements or presentation.
Before you go on, Ebony, let me just say one thing. Does anybody know who debtors are? Who are these debtors that the auditor is checking? Who are they? Ever heard that word, debtors? Suppose somebody comes up to you and said, "You're a bloody debtor," and should you say thank you?
No, I mean, because that's just you having some outstanding bill somewhere.
Yeah, if yeah, a company's debtors are those persons who owe the company money. So if
Right.
you're a debtor, you owe money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's not a compliment, especially if you're a bad debtor. Okay, we have good debtors and we have bad debtors, hence the word bad debt. Whenever you
Right.
question bad debt, that means that a debtor is not paying their bill. Okay, that's where those words come from. And you want to try not to be, you don't mind nothing about being a debtor, nothing about borrowing.
To be
But
consistent.
yeah, you have to be consistent, you have to pay it back, and you don't want to become a bad debtor. And with the credit bureau well on the way, I understand these days,
Yeah.
you don't have any bad debts with that bloody place. Because when the bank calls in, they say you have two bad debts, even one, half of a bad debt. And just the word, dog,
But if they doing it just even if you finance on your home and car insurance, they both add it on too.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So this credit bureau thing is going to be very interesting as far as the borrowing lending process in the Bahamas is concerned. There'll be much crying and gnashing of teeth. The the lenders will be celebrating, and the debtors will be like, "Oh my God, I can't sneak around anymore. They have all my information. If I don't pay, they'll find out. My credit rating will go down. I won't be able to borrow money anywhere, and so on." So it's gonna get really, really cranky for a whole lot of Bahamians, especially those who don't like to pay their bills, and those who don't like to pay their bills on TIME. Okay, for sure. All right, keep going.
The auditor should arrange to send the letter of confirmation of balances for the client's records and see that the reply of confirmation is forwarded to his office directly. Usually this should be sent within 15 or 20 days of the close of the year under the supervision of the audit staff. After the reply is received, the same should be checked with the balances shown in the debtor's ledger and difference properly reconciled. After,
Question. Sorry,
no problem.
Ebony, you just keep saying interesting stuff. Um, why do you think the auditor would send out confirmation letters to debtors and ask them to confirm whether or not they agree with the balance? Why are the auditors doing that?
To verify that what the client is saying they have as a debt is correct.
Absolutely. Okay, that is the reason. And if the client says, "Okay, fine, that's my balance, or it looks like it," okay, great. But if the client says, no way in hell is that my balance, they could be wrong or they could be right. What it does, though, it prompts the auditor to do a check, a reconciliation of those customers who say that their balances are not correct. And sometimes customers are right. Companies make errors. They fail to post payments that came through and all kinds of stuff. So the balances are not reduced in the company books, but the client, they keep in their own record. Every time they make a payment every month, they minus that and subtract it manually. Make sure they keep a running manual balance. Nobody's going to mess with their payment schedule. And they do that, obviously, if push comes to shove, they have a record of their transactions. All right, keep going.
After the reconciliation is done, he should carry out a thorough scrutiny of the debtor's individual accounts. Whenever the number of debtors is very large, test checks can be applied.
What are test checks again, anyone?
taking a certain amount of transactions,
From the sample and testing
from
it.
sample, right, yeah.
Yeah, checking them and
It's from the sample, right?
yes. I thought you guys said you listen. I told you a lot of this stuff stays with you. All you have to do is
No, you know, Sam, because I ain't get that right. I haven't answered that question. I just gone back and look over it because I got it confused with sampling.
I know,
But
but guess what? The good thing about it is you went back, checked it, cleared it up in your mind. That's what this whole process is about. It's about the whole process. Okay? That's the point. All right. All on it. And at the end of the day, it all comes together for your benefit. Mark my word. Somewhere in the future, you say, you know what? That bloody lecturer was correct. Mr. Wilkinson. I thought he was just trying to appease me for that stinking midterm grade. And then you discover, oh, he was not trying to appease me. He was absolutely right. You will discover that. All right, keep going, Ebony.
While scrutinizing the ledger, the auditor should focus on discounts, returns, cash received, rebates allowed, and goods returned. When the debtor balances are determined to be correct, the auditor has to verify provisions for bad and doubtful debts. It is the debts, if the debts are bad and irrecoverable or doubtful, and they are not provided for properly, provided for properly, the financial statements will not portray a true and fair view. Hence, appropriate provisions is to be made by considering the age of the debt, scrutiny of payments received, management opinion, and any other information like the financial position of the debtors. If the auditor fails to verify the appropriateness of the provisions made, he shall be held liable for negligence.
Now, students, for you guys, that is a bunch of accounting mumbo jumbo. What I really want you to get out of that. Now, when I say a bunch of accounting mumbo jumbo, I don't mean it's not important to know. But for your study thing, don't try to remember all that crap. You're gonna get egged. What you do is, if you're looking at these points, one of your points should be simple. Like point 5, all you have to do is auditor should verify for provisions for bad debt. That's it. Because everything else is just detail about provisions of bad debt. I'm not gonna fight you to know all that other stuff about whether it's a true and fair view and whether or not the bad debt structure is appropriate for accounting. I won't do that. Okay, because this is not an accounting class for that stuff. What I want you to know is to be familiar with the kinds of things that the auditor will check under these conditions, whatever those topical issues are. In this case, sundry debtors. Okay. So keep it short, to the point, and clear as you seek to make your notes under your topical issues. And then once you've done that, study them to hell. Don't go back to your major notes anymore. Make good short notes on the good topics. And just after that, study your notes and your topics over and over again. That's the key to this stuff. Okay. One, many years ago when I was doing the Series 7 examination, it's a whole big mess and a big old manual you have to study with hundreds and hundreds of pages. But the point is, once I was done reading that bloody manual, just to get familiar with the context of it, I didn't use that manual to study anymore. I went to examination questions, sample questions, and I did sample examinations over and over and over and over until I was sick of them as vomiting it. I could almost anticipate the next question. And so that was the key to getting through. And that's why I'm telling you, make good notes, clear, keep them short to the point, and then put down your major notes and study your notes that you've made to the bone. Not every now and then, not between fish fry meetings and stuff like this. No, to the bone. Because guess what? When your exam is over, then you can go and do anything you want again. Anybody mess with you before that? Don't mess with me. I have to read this again, study this again. Okay. All right. So that's what I did. Keep going.
After asserting the position as bad or doubtful debts, the debtors are to be classified as A, outstanding for a period of more than 6 months, and B, other debts. Other debts to be considered are those which are fully secured debts due from the officers, directors, and managers of the company, which must be disclosed.
Okay, before you go on, Ebony, I noticed that one or two persons are fighting with this strange looking word in 6. That word, the second word, anybody see what I mean? Point 6, word number 2. I don't want to say it the wrong.
Ascertaining,
Who said it? Say it again.
ascertaining.
Yes.
I don't have my glasses on.
Okay.
I had to look really hard just now.
Point well, point well taken. And if we take off the ing, what does it become?
A certain.
No,
Oh, so you said take off the
ing.
Ascertain. My coworkers
Ascertain,
clown
yeah.
me when after I finish reading.
Your coworker berated you.
Yeah, she said it's ascertain, not a certain. I said, please, girl, shut up. I try to finish off my work.
Yeah, actually, I was trying to be polite. I said, let me see if she can say a certain again. And if she say a certain one more time, I'm gonna interrupt and say, do not say that buddy thing again. Okay, so your coworker is correct. It is ascertain. And whoever said ascertaining, you're absolutely right. And that is part and parcel of the whole thing. Remember, learning is not just about some bloody okie dokie. All right, keep going.
Patent and trademarks. The ownership of patent rights is verified by inspection of certificates issued by the grant of patent by the prescribed authority. If it has been purchased, the agreement surrendering it in favor of the client should be examined. If there are a number of patents held by the client, obtain a schedule giving the full details thereof or verify with reference to the register maintained by the client. It must be verified that the patent rights are alive and legally enforceable, and renewal fees have been paid on the due dates and charged to the revenue account. The last renewal receipt should be examined to ascertain that the patent has not lapsed.
Okay, thank you very much, Ebony, for that. Let me just remind you guys, if you notice, the main points for the auditor to check, 1, 5, let's see, going back. Okay. Be careful when you are preparing for your final. Keep the main topics in mind. Keep the sub points short and to the point, because a lot of my questions are going to be asking you about the topical issue first, and then some of them will ask about, give 1 or 2 examples for a particular topical issue. So please be careful. If I say, for example, what are the kinds of things that auditors check when it's going into the company, and we know, for example, loan against property, loan against those things you need to know. And then if I say, give an example of a loan against property, then you should have a short point somewhere. Oh, if somebody gets a loan, they use the property as collateral. Loan against stock, if a company gets a loan, they use the stock as. See how simple I'm putting that? Because we've already tortured ourselves with the details and the discussions in class. So keep your topical issues clear, keep your points clear, and then study them sufficiently. I know I've said that a couple of times tonight. If we do that, you will see the benefits of that. Okay, so let's see who's going to close us. Janelle,
Yes, sir.
I think it is only fitting that you close our session out tonight, beginning with miscellaneous expenditure and taking us right to the end. It is only fitting. Do you know why?
Why is that, sir?
Because I know you sound like, what the hell is it mean fitting? The reason why I say it's fitting is because I really liked how you jumped in at the beginning and said, "Who gave me that freaking grade?" Okay. Uh, I loved it. I loved it, and I want that to be your incentive for tearing up the final. Okay.
Yes,
Doggone it.
sir.
And you'll see. You do what I tell you, you cannot go wrong. I guarantee you. Now, if you dance around and do some other egg, and anyone, you're gonna, Okay. Then now, miscellaneous expenditure.
Miscellaneous expenditure, preliminary expenses, commission or brokerage on underwriting or subscription of shares and debentures. Discount, discount allowed on issue of shares and debentures. D, interest paid out of capital. E, development and other expenditure. Preliminary expenses. These are expenses incurred for creating or incorporating a company, that is, legal expenses for drafting memorandum of association, articles of association, stamp fees, etc. Auditors should check the prospectus of the statement in lieu of the prospectus for the amount of preliminary expenses. Contracts with promoters, vendors, underwriters should be checked. Board of directors authorization for payment of expenses should be checked. Receipts should be obtained for payments. Actual expenditure for preliminary expenses should not exceed the amount mentioned in the prospectus or statement in lieu of the prospectus. Such expenses should be approved by shareholders in general meeting.
Again,
Development and
sorry, when you guys, let me just ask a question just off the top. Can somebody give two examples of preliminary expenses in as simply a form as you could? What are two examples of preliminary expenses?
well, they give the examples in question one. I mean
Yeah.
in one.
Give me two, but give it to me simple. Don't give me all the detail.
Preliminary expenses.
Yeah, example number one would be,
Stamp fees
yeah,
and
stamp,
legal expenses.
yeah,
You mean like VAT and thingy?
no, just as it is, stamp fees and legal expenses. I mean, if you say that as part of it, I wouldn't argue with that. That's one example. What's another example?
We got to find an example for all these things.
No, you may have to find one or two. That's why I tell you to keep your notes simple.
They say contracts with promoters,
Contracts with promoters.
vendors,
Yeah, that's
and
it.
vendors.
Yeah, because we've already gone through the detail. Keep it simple and study it once you've done your proper notes. Students don't like to do that because it's time consuming, but that's where the magic is, in the time consumption. Because while you're making notes, your brain is recording it. And then when you sit back, say, every day I'm going to study this bloody thing until exam time, amazing things happen. Keep going.
Okay, development and other expenditure. Auditors should verify: one, board of directors approval for such expenditure. Two, receipts should be obtained from persons to whom payments is made. Three, deferred revenue expenditure should be written off as early as possible, usually 3 to 2 years. 3 to 5 years. 5, I'm missing a point A.
Yeah, that should be.
The amount written off should be shown separately in the profit and loss account. Verification of liabilities, meaning the verification of liabilities implies an inquiry into the nature, extent, and existence of liabilities. It involves ensuring the following. One, that all the liabilities have been clearly stated on the liability side of the balance sheet. Two, that all the liabilities related to the business itself. Three, that they are correct and authorized. Four, that they are shown in the balance sheet and at their actual amount.
Let me say this before Janelle go any further. You see that number number two, that all the liabilities made to the business itself, you may be surprised to know that some persons and firms might incur personal liability for themselves. And like, for example, if they're the financial controller or accountant or some such person, and they have access to the financial reports and the general ledger, they can incur their own personal debt, then create an account, put it on as the company's debt, use the company's money to repay the debt until it's paid off in full. And if there's no auditor checking, internal or external, and nobody following up on these things, somebody can actually, and many people have actually gotten away with it. Isn't that amazing? So they go out and they get a car for $50,000. Then they come back because they have access to certain records and nobody's checking them. They go ahead and put an entry on the books and call it miscellaneous liabilities or liabilities other. And every month they have a check drawn to pay it off until it's paid off. And in fact, it's not the company's debt, it's the controller's debt or some such person who's in a senior management position who's able to get away with that crap. It seems absurd, but it happens all too often. Not necessarily with a car, but with stuff. That's why it's important for the auditors to check to make sure that the liabilities are not fake and that they actually belong to the company and no one else. How about that? All right, keep going.
It is an important duty of an auditor to verify the liabilities appearing in the balance sheet of the company. The object of verification of liabilities is to ascertain whether there is any improper inflation or deflation of values or improper creation of imaginary liabilities in the book. This form of manipulation is done in most cases to inflate or deflate the profits of the concern and thus make the position of the business appear stronger than it actually is, or to create a secret reserve. As a result of such manipulation, the profit and loss account and the balance sheet end up incorrect, and the balance sheet does not exhibit a true and fair view of the state of affairs of the company. So the auditor must take all possible steps to ensure that all liabilities are recorded properly in the books of accounts of the business. It is advisable that the auditor should, besides verifying the liabilities as shown in the balance sheet, should get a certificate from the management that all liabilities of any nature have been included in the books of accounts and the contingent liabilities have been shown by way of a footnote to the balance sheet or have been provided for.
One other point, notice that whole big fat stinky paragraph is all about the auditor verifying the liabilities on the balance sheet. See that? So if I say to you, blah, 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 and your answer is, one of the points is that the auditors verify the liabilities, man, that pretty much covers it. Unless I ask you a specific question with regards to the balance sheet and profit and loss. And I'm not gonna get you down into that stuff because that's accounting stuff. I just want you to know the key issue at this point, that when the auditor comes in, they need to check those kinds of important things. And if you're responsible in the company for any payments or what is owing, etc., then you need to know that the auditor will be checking you. If you're responsible for making any disbursements, paying any bills, or whatever the case might be. See my point? Notice, does anybody know why the auditor would ask senior management to sign a document saying that we have disclosed everything to you, Mr. Auditor? Why would they want senior management to sign off on that? You think?
Obviously, they want to protect themselves.
Of course, because they want to make sure that if push comes to shove, management cannot say, we didn't know. Okay? And also auditors are well aware that managers lie about their actual liabilities. They hide some of it somewhere and they don't disclose all of it. They have it what we call off the books, and they don't put anything in the notes and they don't tell the auditors on purpose. And so, as a kind of protection to themselves, auditors in modern times have been asking management to sign a document saying, I hereby declare and I swear on my mother's grave that all the liabilities on the balance sheet are true and correct, that they all belong to this company that I am in charge of, and that there are or are not any contingent liabilities that are outstanding. And if there are, they have been properly and fully disclosed in the financial statements, in the notes to the financial statement. Sign here. Makes sense these days because there are a lot of crooked top management people in the boards, the board room, and in senior management of firms, acting innocent when in fact many of them are indeed culprits. Okay, just say that so you can remember. So when you go out in the world of work, you can be like, now let's see who the culprits are. Okay, keep going.
Loans. For verification of loans, the auditor should consider the following points. The auditor should examine the memorandum on articles of the company to find out the powers of the company to borrow money. The auditor should examine the agreements and correspondence regarding the loan. The auditor should vouch the receipts of cash on the loan account with the receipts issued in respect of the loan and the corresponding entries in the cash book. The auditor should examine the certificate of verification issued by the registrar of companies. If the loan has been secured by mortgaging any property, the auditor should vouch the payment of interest with the counterfoils
Counterfoils.
Hello?
Hi. You keep going.
Sorry. Oh, that's my. You could have heard. You could hear me.
Yes, indeed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
The auditor should vouch the payment of interest with the counterfoils of the receipts issued to the vendors and the corresponding entries in the cash book. He should also check the repayment of the loan with the counterfoils of the checkbook, the bank passbook, and the cash book. In addition to the above, the auditor may ask for a confirmatory letter from the party who has advanced the loan to ensure that the interest on the loan is not due and the co-payment
Your
of loans are. Sorry,
recoupments.
recoupments of the loan are currently recorded in the books of accounts. In the case of a bank overdraft, the agreement with the bank and the security offered should be examined by the author.
Thank you very much, Danelle. Before we close up, does anybody know what the word recoup means?
Recover or go get.
Absolutely, to recover an amount that is outstanding debt or any other amount that is outstanding. Okay? So when you hear people walk around and say, man, I need to recoup my losses, they need to recover them so that they can continue in business or recoup the money that they loaned out. They need to find out whoever borrowed their money and now does not want to pay for some reason. Recoup. That's a nice word to remember. All right. So that's it for the practical applications. We've seen a lot of them. Remember, keep your notes and your information simple so that when it's study time, you can remember them more effectively. Remember, the more you study, the better you will remember and be able to tackle the questions. They will not be difficult questions. The material in part two is not as intense even as part one, even though it has its moments. So if you guys do your thing well, you should be fine. Look out for with regards to the makeup examination. If you don't see it within 48 hours, it means there'll be no makeup examination. If you do see it in 48 hours, it means you should work like hell to finish it within the prescribed time and get it back to me in the time that I indicate. Okay? Any questions? Please don't wait until the last minute to finish your research work. You should have been working on that for weeks and weeks now. If you have not finished it, try to use this weekend to finish it so you can have the rest of the time, if possible, to review, study, and get ready for the McCoy. Any questions before we break? All right, fantastic. You guys have been great as usual. Please be safe out there. COVID and some other strains, they tell me, are on the move still. Do not take anything for granted. You don't want to catch any bugs going down the stretch towards your final examination and your energy to study and prepare and all that stuff. So please be safe. I shall see you guys for our final session next week, Thursday. Okay? Anybody hear any
Okay,
other?
good night.
Good night. Good night. Take care.
Very good night.
Thank you.
Good night.